People's Party of Canada's multicultural and immigration policy is the topic of debate today in Behind the News. With me, I am Halima Sadia and I'm joined in the studio with David McLeaf. He's PPC candidate from Mississauga Centre, and Tahir Aslam Gora, who is the candidate for PPC party from Mississauga Malton riding. So I welcome you both today.
Thanks for having me.
Election season, I would say. PPC, quite new party. It's the topic of debate everywhere. People are talking and they're bashing it because of its multicultural and immigration policies.
Right.
So how would you like to give your reflection about this? What's your take, David? How would you like to express to our viewers about your opinion?
I think it's actually a very good policy. It seems to be the only party that's actually looking to properly address and seriously address our immigration challenges in Canada. If you speak to many different individuals, they tend to give you a sense that they're not too happy with the current immigration policies, especially with the idea of temporary foreign workers, the irregular migrants at like Roxham Road, that kind of thing. The fact that the majority of the immigrants seem to flock to very particular cities, which can cause prices on housing to go up or make jobs a little more scarce. So I think the fact that we're looking at it as a way to have a more intelligent and economic approach towards immigration, I think that's really great for Canadians.
So how do you see multicultural aspect regarding that also?
Well, it depends how you define multiculturalism, because some people see it as the values of a person. Some people see it as the kind of food they bring with them or the history they bring with them. I think multiculturalism is great. I just don't think it needs to be forced. It's something that people bring with them when they come to this country. What's important, however, is that they come to this country with the right values. So freedom of speech, freedom of religion, kind of a government that approaches things in a secular manner. I think
gender equality, which is
gender
also,
equality, yeah.
These are the values which we value as a society.
Right.
The
Canada
most.
is very live and let live.
So how about you, Tahir? How would you like to reflect upon those two issues?
No, actually very important. I think we are the brave party that addresses this core issue. Unfortunately, when it comes to talk about immigration particularly, media and other political parties, they start bashing you as quote unquote racist. But I'm from immigrant background. So I like this immigration policy more relevant and more appropriate for our beautiful country. Because other parties are trying to buy their votes by selling open immigration without any policy, without any integration of immigrants. Our party insists on integrating immigrants in Canadian society. And what our leader announced last Wednesday here in Mississauga Malton riding, he said very clearly that we would bring more skilled immigrants to Canada rather than bringing immigrants without any strategy. And they even get frustrated because when they can't find jobs according to their profile, they would be frustrated. So I think People Party of Canada is addressing this core issue with very precise sort of angle, and I would say that it is very important that we should understand the importance of immigrants, and that could only happen if we bring skilled immigrants.
So especially PPC is being called racist because somehow or the other people have the idea that it is against immigrants. It does not like the people who are immigrant. So how would you defend this allegation? What will be your take on that, David?
I think the problem is that people aren't actually reading the platform, or they're not taking the time to understand what the party is about or even just inform themselves on what the party is saying. We have immigrants in our party. Canada is a country that has many immigrants in it. It would be insane for us to say we should have no immigration. Obviously, we need immigration to an extent, and that's the important thing. You have to be able to balance it on an economic side. So what we're looking for is a reduced immigration. We're looking for a higher percentage of economic immigrants as opposed to family immigrants or refugees or that kind of thing. So I don't think that makes us racist. We're just saying that we need to look at it for the betterment of Canada.
Which is fair enough.
Right.
Every country has a right. Citizenship is not a right, it's a privilege.
That's right.
And integration is also important, that how you are a contributor in the society.
Absolutely.
Since if you see the world situation right now, everybody wants to immigrate everywhere, be immigrant. We do need immigrants. Canada is called multicultural because of its immigrant roots.
Right.
So what will be your take on this allegation, Tahir? How would you define that?
No, this is just a bizarre allegation, I would say. As David mentioned, we do have candidates of many ethnic backgrounds. What we are looking for integrating all communities as one community, Canadian community. We do not believe in identity politics. We do not believe in sort of extreme multiculturalism. So that's why our leader announced a new immigration policy from PPC. And if we make government, we would certainly go ahead with that policy, as well as what our leader said. I agree with him that we should repeal Multicultural Act. So, I mean, when people call us racist, I just laugh. I say, what are you talking about? I mean, we do have candidates from all backgrounds. And not just, I mean, because we are touching a sensitive issue. No one dares to talk about those sensitive issues in our environment of political correctness. So that's why people jump into that kind of a shallow and hollow conclusion. That is a wrong perception. We are just normal Canadians. We believe in Canadian values. I totally denounce when Mr. Trudeau says that Canada has no core value. No, we do have Canadian values. As I said over and over, that our values are gender equality, separation of religion and politics, individual freedom and total freedom of expression. If someone wears a sari or someone wears a skirt, is the culture. But we all share common values, and those common values are, again, as I say over and over, gender equality. If anyone from any cultural background believes in gender equality in Canada, he's our Canadian fellow citizen.
Canada has been through a lot of evolution and revolution, and we have reached to certain conclusions after so much understanding and research work done about social values, and we cannot deny them altogether. That means we are denying the whole history of our country. So let's come back to the immigration point, where USA and Canada border is a huge issue, along with its economic ties and its conflicts. So our leader, Maxime Bernier, has actually said that he has actually tabled building a fence between the border, US and Canada border. How do you see it, David? What will be your take on that?
Well, that's not exactly what he said. And it's unfortunate that that's what people seem to focus on, especially in the media. They use it as their headline. The speech he gave in Mississauga was an hour and a half, and the fence comment was 30 seconds. What he really said was that he would put up a fence at very specific locations that are known to be popular for irregular migrants as a way to basically deter them from coming, and also as a symbolic to say that you have to go through the proper channels. We will not just accept you just because you're kind of circumventing the whole process. So it's not about the whole border. That wouldn't make any sense. That's a foolish thing, and he did not suggest that. It's about very specific locations in Canada.
which will be very vulnerable throughout the time. That's why
Yeah,
he
like
wanted
Roxham
some
Road.
solution to
Yeah,
that.
like Roxham Road is very known for that, for example.
So
Yeah, no, I agree with David. And unfortunately, when Mr. Donald Trump, US President, put some sort of strict conditions on illegal migrants in the US, so many illegal migrants started walking to Canada, particularly through that probably Roxham place.
Yes, in Quebec.
In Quebec. And it's a well-known fact around the world now. Our Prime Minister welcomed those illegal migrants from the United States, our friend country, giving them the message that those people are not safe in the United States, but we are welcoming them. First of all, this message was wrong to our best neighbor. And secondly, that was not good for Canada. And when Maxime Bernier says that we will put a fence, particularly in that area, that would not cost probably not much. If it would cost maybe a couple $1,000s. So it is. He was talking about just about a certain area. And actually, on Twitter, Mr. Maxime Bernier showed the pictures of those kind of fence in that area. So that's only he talked about, but the media and the opponent political parties, they are making it a big news.
And we have to
That's what probably their business is.
and we have to see that in the long term, how much we have to spend on the immigrants and how much we are costing the fence to save that kind of
Right.
long-term expenditure. So let's come back to the repeal act, if he is in power, which is actually creating a lot of disturbance and a lot of, I would say, shake and aches. So what is your take on that?
I think anything that comes to sort of a social engineering or trying to massage how Canadian society should be and kind of force a certain outcome, I think that's wrong, and definitely something that we should get rid of. It should be an organic natural process. Definitely something to get rid of.
Tahir, what would be your take
You
on
know,
that?
actually, this Multicultural Act was introduced by father of today's Prime Minister. When Mr. Pierre Trudeau introduced this Multicultural Act, circumstances were quite different. We had different kinds of immigrants at the time. They had not much problem in terms of assimilating or integrating in our society. So that was a different part of the history. Today, what we are witnessing, we are importing refugees and migrants to our country. Some of them have different culture, and we encourage them to live in their own culture. There's nothing wrong in it, but we have to understand that all cultures are not equal. A culture that does not support gender equality, how could that culture be equal to a culture that supports gender equality, for instance? So these are the very clear issues. And now what we are witnessing during the past at least 2 decades, about 20 years immigration, that we can clearly see ghettos. This is that community hub. That's fine. But when we go into those hubs, we really find that they are living in those kinds of environment which are contrary to Canadian values, which are contrary to our even laws sometime. For instance, there is no practice of Sharia law in Canada, but I and you, Halima, particularly understand that there are areas where people like to practice Sharia values, quote unquote, in those hubs. And those values are contrary to our Canadian values. So when we talk about repealing Multicultural Act, means that we don't want ghettos. We want all Canadians live side by side, live together all across Canada. We don't want to call a certain area a ghetto for certain community. It's not actually good for that community too, because we believe in one community, which is the Canadian community. So when we start dividing communities by their origin, so that means we are trying to, our political parties especially, trying to buy votes from those communities. One thing, and secondly, sometimes our policymakers and our special interest groups, immigration interest groups, they want to have those ghettos as well, because that sort of a help promote their businesses, so that they could create settlement agencies, they could have sort of all those kind of buzzword businesses. So this is the problem. We are consuming our financial resources to fund those kind of projects. We don't need that. If all Canadians from all backgrounds learn to live with each other, then there is already sport is there for all communities. So I think it's a great idea when PPC leader says that we would repeal Multicultural Act.
So how would we define multiculturalism then? Because we are by nature a multicultural society. So how would we define multiculturalism while keeping intact our own values? How would you see that, David?
As I said earlier, depends how you define multiculturalism, and obviously you're asking me to define that for you. But I think the important thing to take away from that is Canada was founded on certain values. Freedom of the individual, liberty, respect, freedom of opportunity, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Basically, it's all on the individual to live and let live. So people that come here, as long as they share those values and let other people live and let live, and they themselves live and let live, they can bring their music, they can bring their food, they can bring their heritage with them, and that's fine. I think it's just about
PPC actually says that let's talk about 4 core values.
Right.
Because every society has some core values to
Right.
stand on, and then it actually embraces the shades of different ethnicities, which is called multiculturalism.
Right.
So PPC, especially when we talk about PPC party, we talk about 4 core values. How would you see, Tahir, that? How would you define
No,
that?
it's not just 4 core values. I was just citing those 4 values, like gender equality, separation of religion and politics, individual freedom and freedom of expression, are the basic core values. But there are other few components of our society are there as well. When it comes to defining multiculturalism, yes, multiculturalism is a blend of cultures, but it does not mean that you eat my samosa and I'm not going to eat your burger. It's all-way traffic. It's not like that you celebrate my culture and I will not celebrate your culture. It's not
only
multiculturalism.
not celebrate, but I will have a strong contradictory ideas which are against your celebrations. And we have to realize that this society is based on Western values. We accept that or we don't accept that. That is the reality. So Western culture has some core values which is why this society is called a Western society.
No, absolutely. I'll jump into this debate. Western value definitely is core outlines of our society. But those values are based on human rights. I call them universal human rights. Western values so far have evolved to the extent that now we respect gender equality. Now we respect individual freedom. Now we respect freedom of expression. Now we respect separation of religion and politics. So these are the values, you call them Western values or you call them universal human rights. So these four, for instance, these four components of Western values, if not liked by any group or any individual, then what's the purpose of that group or individual living in Canada? And what's the purpose of that group or individual coming to Canada? These are not just Canadian or Western values, these are universal human rights. I mean, as I said, if a person, if my Muslim fellow agrees with those values and he or she wants to go to mosque, we have no issue. But these are our core values.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are not just, I mean, again, I would emphasize, these are not just our, Western values. These are like universal human rights.
If we see 150 years ago when Canada just started to building itself, from then to now it has evolved, it has worked hard towards certain liberties and human rights, and
Right.
then we have reached to the point where we have. So these are our values,
Right.
which we have struggled a lot and reached to a certain point. How come we can go back and see those which needs to be reformed and still needs to be advocated to come forward and see that this is the other side of the coin? So I think that which you say, Tahir, is two-way. I see it that way. It's that way, two-way. That you have to see that how much work has been done so that you can integrate and see that rationally when we evolve, we reach to certain conclusions equally to a certain point simultaneously together.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much. Anything special would you like to convey to the audience through us today, David?
I would invite you to take the time to actually read the platform, to read the policy specifically on immigration, as that's what we're talking about today. Don't just read the headlines and try to base an opinion on that. Inform yourself. The People's Party is looking to tackle immigration in a very intelligent and practical manner. So I invite you to read it and actually think about it and what it would do for your quality of life.
Tahir?
No, I agree with David. Our fellow Canadians need to visit People's Party of Canada's website, and they have to read Maxime Bernier's policy on immigration and multiculturalism by themselves, and they would be the best judge before they get opinion from anyone else.
I thank you both for joining me today in the studio and having that debate today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Multiculturalism and immigration. Immigration Canada. Canada matters to us. Canada matters to Canadians. We have the right to see where our country is heading towards. With all these debates, we will come again in the behind the news. Stay tuned and watch us.